Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today, which is about responsible ship recycling, Maersk. And I'm Lene Serpa. I'm Head of Corporate Sustainability and ESG at Maersk. And I'm joined today by Prashant Widge, who is head of our Responsible Ship Recycling program. So, Prashant, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Lene. I'm Prashant Widge, as Lene said, and I'm leading the Responsible Ship Recycling program, a classic shared value, sustainability and ESG driven one, and I'm excited to speak more about it.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today about this program. And so we've done a number of sessions already about Maersk's ESG strategy, environment, social governance strategy, launched it last year. And ship recycling is indeed one of those topics that we work with under the framework of the strategy, but it's certainly not a new topic or a new issue for us, right? It's actually one that we have been working with for quite a number of years. So I thought you could start by telling us a little bit about how it connects to Maersk's overall ESG strategy and ship recycling as an issue. Why is it a sustainability issue?
Yeah, as you've already pointed out to the fact, Lene, that ship recycling is actually a classic sustainability issue. And also something which is very much driven by our values, particularly constant care. When we look at sustainability, we really think about it from a people, planet, and profit lens. And in ship recycling, that's exactly what we've done by engaging with the industry. We've really touched the lives of people in terms of making sure that they can work safely in a healthy and safe environment and return back home. That includes the subcontracted workers in terms of making sure that we are doing ship recycling in an environmentally friendly manner, having safeguards to protect the environment, and then to make sure that this is also something which is commercially viable in the long term. And creating incentives for the industry is something that we focused on. And in terms of connecting that to our ESG strategy, that's again something which it cuts across environment, social, and governance aspects. Particularly on the environment side, it goes deeper into the circularity piece, which is, again, something which is gaining a lot of focus and something which is integral to the recycling. There's also an impact in terms of credits and Scope 3 emissions. And by and large, the way we do it is really to minimize impact caused by this industry and our ships being recycled in a responsible manner. On the social side, safety is integral, and that's something which takes priority as always. And in addition to that, we also look at aspects which are governing on the governance in terms of labor and human rights, anti-corruption, subcontractors. So the sustainable procurement aspect is deeply ingrained in the governance piece.
Excellent. And I think we'll come back in a second to, excuse me, how exactly we work with it in Maersk and what impacts we've been able to achieve. But first, could you start by providing some context also to the ship recycling industry as such? What are some of the challenges that we see with this industry?
I think there are quite a few, but let's just start out also with the fact that all industries need to have a certain overarching regulation to which we can then hold the community and the ecosystem responsible towards, and which is unfortunately something that is lacking in the ship recycling industry. So today, we lack a global mandatory legal framework, and something that is work in progress, but that's also been for a while now. In addition to that, the industry is still very labor intensive, and that is also where it is more than 90% of ships are being recycled in substandard conditions in South Asia, in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. A lot of traction and change has been driven since our engagement in 2015, but there's still a long way to go in terms of really lifting the industry as a whole.
And you mentioned, so of course we call it ship recycling, right? So you were also mentioning a little bit the connection to Scope 3 emissions and the potential value of steel scrap here. So how do you see that in the industry playing out?
That is one of those key aspects that we are working on from a trying to sort of attack this particular element, because today, the way ship recycling happens, the scrap from ships at the end of life, which is high quality, is not differentiated enough. And that is something which we are trying to make sure that we can, as we progress in this journey, also go in the downstream markets and try to differentiate the scrap from ships and connect that scrap towards the green steel transition, which is once again an area that's drawing a lot of impetus and something which we are trying to connect for our own ships, for our next assets in terms of having green steel on our assets, but at the same time also to try to connect our scrap to that of our customers and thereby decarbonizing our customers' steel value chains.
Okay. So there's both an aspect of incentivizing suppliers, but then there's the foundation around ensuring responsibility, right?
That's correct.
And if we look back to, as we start out by saying, this is an issue that we've been working with for a number of years in Maersk. So tell us about how did this start, right? What were the, why did Maersk start engaging with the ship recycling program in 2015?
Yeah. If we just go back from 2009, so we've had a ship recycling policy since 2009 when the IMO adopted the Hong Kong Convention. It was in 2015 that we had identified that we have quite a few vessels that were growing and getting older and nearing their fourth special survey, meaning the 20-year mark. And we needed to make sure that we engage in the long term with this industry. When we decided to do that, just like everything else that we work with, doing a thorough due diligence is an absolute imperative. And that's what we did and realized that there was clearly the need for us to engage on the ground and really build impetus. And also when we began to work with Alang, we realized that they had the willingness to really uplift and transform, but at the same time, they needed a bit of hand-holding and really the guidance. And that's really where we decided to conceive a program that was where we had clear, well-defined standards, and then having our own men on the ground to handhold, uplift, capacity and capability, build the yards to reach levels that were acceptable to us.
Exactly. And I just want to come back and, because you mentioned the 20-year mark of the vessel, and I'm thinking people who don't know the shipping industry very well, maybe don't know what that means. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, because ship recycling is simply, you could say a part of the life cycle, right, of the vessels, of the asset. Absolutely. So what happens at that 20-year mark?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to put that perspective. So thanks, Lene. It really, like every asset that comes alive needs to come to end of life. And I think that's exactly what happens with a ship. Typically, a ship would have a lifetime of 25 years, but there are also some that have longer lifetimes. And from a container shipping perspective, we look at it from a 25, 30-year mark at most. And that's why we wanted to make sure that as ships were closing in on the 20-year mark, we actually had well-defined responsible ship recycling program in place with clear standards being defined and established, while at the same time we had the ground on the supplier side ready to handle the pipeline of vessels that were coming as they were aging.
So it's about ensuring that we take responsibility also at the end of life, right?
Absolutely.
And perhaps even ensuring that there is a future life for the steel. Right?
Absolutely. And I think that's where the steel circularity piece really comes in. We make sure as Maersk that we have our men on the ground when we build our vessels, when we dock our vessels, and also when we recycle our vessels. That's really where we take responsibility across the life cycle and truly in line with our values.
And given the efforts that and the engagement that we've had, in particular with yards in Alang in India, since initiating this program, what do you see as the main impact over these years?
I think there have been quite a few. If we look back at the last 5 years that we've been engaging at Alang, we've responsibly recycled 14 ships on the ground without a single lost time injury, leave alone
safety incident,
without a single safety incident. There have also been nil environment spills or hazardous materials that are on board which need to be handled in a careful way and made sure that it's complied with in terms of disposal requirements have also happened in a safe and sustainable way. So that's really something which we have a lot of pride in, that through the program that we've conceived through the mitigations that we've had in this high-risk file that we work with, we've managed to achieve extraordinary results.
Yeah.
While at the same time, we've not limited ourselves only to the yards and ship recycling. We have a responsibility to the community and the society, and that goes in line with our purpose in terms of really improving life for all by integrating the world. And that's where we've gone into the Alang hinterland. And in that context, we've also been working with implementing partners like the Red Cross as an example, and operating mobile health units, which have been working across the entire industry. And in less than 4 years, we've administered more than 75,000 services through that mobile health unit to over 10,000 workers and their families and the villages in the vicinity. We've also been imparting more proactive trainings to the workers, and more than 5,000 out of the 10,000 workers in the area have been trained on hygiene, sexually transmitted diseases, as well as substance abuse. So there's a lot of engagement and work that we do in the hinterland as well, in our very much in sync with, once again, our value driven by constant care.
And I would say it's also, isn't it, part of our standards for responsible ship recycling? Because we know that it's, one thing is the ensuring the responsibility of the, let's say, the technical way that the vessel is taken apart, is recycled, as you say, with regard for safety, with regard for the environmental aspects, but also ensuring that the community around Alang is actually has access to healthcare, for example, right?
Absolutely, and that's really where we really look at this from a holistic lens, where we're covering 24 hours of a worker's life cycle in that perspective as well, making sure that they are healthy and safe outside work, and also, of course, when they are within the work from a standards lens. Yes.
Good. But can you then say, so Maersk was, of course, engaged in Alang and still are engaged in Alang. And what have you seen happening then in the industry during these last years? How has that developed?
The industry has also moved quite a bit, and more so driven by initiatives from the value chain than the regulation, as we just discussed. I think it started with the suppliers and the yards in Alang voluntarily embracing the Hong Kong Convention and starting to invest. And then it were organizations like ourselves who've gone in and sort of incentivized them and allowed them to really also monetize some of the efforts that they've made. And what that has spurred then is really more ship owners to come and join us, and more suppliers seeing that there was a real business case out of this of doing responsible ship recycling. So creating that environment started with, of course, us coming in, and then a lot of other ship owners that piggyback on us has been the way that we've driven change. While, of course, that has been on the supply-demand discussion, we've also been working on the transparency and the level playing field, which has been missing in the ship recycling industry to a great deal. And there, alongside like-minded peers in 2019, we conceived the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative. It is an initiative through which we are, as responsible ship owners, putting out our policies and practices, disclosing those, and we are then having customers, investors, and stakeholders who are having access to this public data, and who we are encouraging to include this into their decision making and reward the leaders here. Right.
So it's important to drive that transparency, right? To then ensure or hopefully ensure that that it is also valued, as you say, also perhaps by, there's so much focus within ESG on rating from the rating agencies side, and looking to different ways of measuring, right, responsibility, sustainability in the shipping industry.
That is correct. I can give an example here, Lene. We've had quite a few investor calls around this file, given the sensitivity and the focus also from the ESG rating agencies. And in specific, one of them who we actually showcased our program was able to actually nudge another another ship owner who then had to sort of face the heat, if I put it that way, of really signing up for the transparency initiative. So I think it's really where the stakeholders across in the industry need to start to come together and sort of push the bar higher for transparency and thereby a level playing field.
Exactly. So transparency helps to drive progress, actually, and impact in that way.
Absolutely. Transparency helps to drive progress, impact, and eventually change. That's correct.
What are the main challenges that you see still ahead?
There are a few that we have. The fact that we need to have regulations clearly stands out as one of the key ones. We need the IMO Hong Kong Convention to enter into force. But having said that, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that it was adopted in 2009 and over a decade has passed. And it's a question worth asking if that regulation is actually does that stand the test of what the times are today? So that's something which is important. On the EU regulation, there are quite a few industry studies that are alluding to the fact that there's a huge challenge with the capacity and the capability of what are the yards that are on the EU list. And in that context as well, and we know that the Commission is working and there are a few aspects of that which are work in progress. But fundamentally, the ship recycling regulation has failed to deliver to expectations. And something which we had highlighted before, which unfortunately over the time has only proven to be correct. When we go further into the supply side of the value chain, then there are clearly lack of solutions that are available today for big ships to be recycled in a responsible way. And if I connect that to the demand side, we see through industry studies as well, there's going to be the ship recycling volumes will double in the next 5 years and nearly quadruple in the next decade. And that a big part of those volumes are going to be the large vessels, which is going to be even more difficult to be recycled in the Indian subcontinent with the current methods, given that they'll be stopping a few hundred meters away from the shore. And that means that
because there's simply not space.
That is correct.
In the yards for these large vessels.
That is correct. And that would then transcend into an opportunity. With each of these challenges is an opportunity. And the opportunity here would really be when there's going to be the size of the pie growing at the pace that it does for new entrants to really come in. And that's also something which we are working with in terms of creating opportunities for post-Panamax vessels, the larger vessels, which are more than 350 meters long, and 4,000 TEU container vessels. Those can actually be recycled in a responsible manner to our standard through working with the new entrants. And then we're creating opportunities in that context.
And this is where it also comes back then to decarbonization, right? And our ambition as Maersk to be climate neutral by 2040 in all our operations, scope 1, 2, and 3. And ship recycling, the end of life of assets, actually comes under scope 3.
That is correct.
Yes.
And that's exactly where we need to make sure that we can differentiate the scrap that comes out from our end-of-life vessels. And it doesn't go into the steel value chain the way it does today. And in that context, as we work on creating opportunities, it's also an area that we are focusing on in terms of building the downstream markets where the scrap from our vessels could then actually go into production of green steel, steel that is 5 times less carbon intensive than the steel that's today produced by fossil iron ore. And that green steel is what we need for our own assets to achieve our ambitions for 2030 in the near term and 2040 in the long term. And at the same time, we can also connect that green steel to that of our customers' value chain. And we know that in that context, there are automotives, renewables, and some of these segments that are leading the pack in terms of the demand for green steel and the role that we can play to decarbonize our customers' value chain is another aspect that we're looking at.
Absolutely. So that will be very exciting to follow going forward. And I think if we just end now, because I think we're coming close to the end of our time, but if we end with a call to action, right? And if I ask you, what would you like to see? If you look at what would be the most important things that you would like some of the important stakeholders in this industry to actually focus on going forward?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. When we think about it from a ship owner's lens, I think we need more ship owners to start to demand responsible ship recycling in the real sense of the term. And of course, when you have that as an imperative, we need to be willing to incentivize the yards to do this, to achieve this. For the recyclers, I think there's a huge opportunity because there's clearly a market that's growing and there can be new entrants that can come in. It's an imperative that the recyclers also go down in their downstream markets and try to differentiate their scrap, because there is upside from recycling scrap and producing green steel out of it, which they can then achieve. So those would be the top two. Of course, for the regulators, we would really want that the IMO would look at Hong Kong Convention in its current shape and form, and how has the industry moved since, and then make an informed decision of how should we then sort of make sure that we are abreast of how the industry has matured in the past decade. For the European Commission, of course, we then need to make sure that they can go back to the drawing board and have a look at the EU ship recycling regulation and more investigate what has led to it delivering below expectations, and then how can we get more capacity, real capacity and capabilities for handling the large vessels within the EU list. For the green steel producers, and that's something which is very close to our heart at Maersk, I think it's again something where there's a huge, there's lack of quality and quantity scrap today, and ship scrap is unique in terms of its quality and strengths, and that's something which they could then seek and connect from ships end of life to producing green steel.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I think this is it's a fantastic example, as you started by mentioning. This is really a classic sustainability issue. It's one that is a systemic issue, you could say, right? And we at Maersk, we can play a role by taking leadership to drive change, but we definitely need all stakeholders to play their part in it as well. But thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us about it, and thank you for all the efforts that you and your team are doing on ship recycling. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lene. Thanks.